Okay, so you can barely see this. That over there is the CN Tower. It's Toronto. You're gonna have to take my word for it because we've got some fog happening in the horizon. This here is my Coldframe. I built it at the beginning of the winter, so I'm new to bonsai. I will tell you that. My background is in the construction industries, well over a decade. So this is what I built, and a lot of it is salvage materials. What I've bought for this, my actual purchases were just the plexiglass as well as my rigid insulation. And this is a modified Coldframe. I am on a concrete balcony, and essentially what we got here is it's insulated. This is rigid insulation. The side panels as well as the back, they go straight down to the floor of the Coldframe. On the floor, the surface of the floor anyways, we have a product known as DMX. This product is essentially underlayment for flooring. So if you're installing laminate, vinyl, hardwood, it's generally good practice to put a underlayment, and this is one of the better ones. We'll take a closer look here. You'll notice there is some indents or some raised bubbles, and that is for drainage purposes as well as a little bit of aeration that can flow, some airflow underneath those pots. I put an incline on this going towards the back, so the back is raised, and underneath this DMX I have another panel of that rigid insulation as well, with the DMX on top of it. And on the front here I have another panel, and this one doesn't go down to the floor. This one goes to the surface of the DMX. So its purpose is drainage. So it will allow a little bit of airflow to come in, not much, but its purpose is drainage. So like I said, there's an incline. I have those indents going on, so I can basically water these plants directly in this Coldframe, and the water will flow out to the front, drop through that little drainage channel, drop below the floor of this thing, and will naturally go out that way with the incline of this patio, this balcony. So as I did mention, I am in the GTA, that's Canada, Ontario, not the coldest of Canadian climates, what you might expect. We don't live in igloos, nothing like that. But we have some severe weather, right? Our summers are very hot and humid. We generally get temperatures in the mid-20s degrees Celsius, and we'll definitely get some mid-30s as well, along with, the odd mid-40s, and that is hot. That is very hot. Whereas our winters are pretty much just as severe. Typically, we will be sitting at -20, negative mid-20s, -15. However, you can basically bank on it. But every year we're going to get a few weeks, give or take, of some extremely cold weather. So -35, sometimes even -40s, mid-40s. And for some of you in different climates, you might think that a Coldframe, a modified Coldframe, is a bit of an overkill. Essentially, it has a few purposes. One is protecting these from wind. As the soil freezes over, you can have an effect called transpiration, where your plant will lose its moisture, its humidity, its water retention through the leaves. And and I assume also through the actual trunk as well, but probably not. So that's one purpose. The other purpose is when we get those deep freezes, this is going to stay at a more consistent temperature. It's still going to get cold. It is not heated, but it will generally keep those temperature spikes from the interior of this thing. I did mention I bought some plexiglass, and that is on the lid, on the hatch. So the purpose of that is to allow the sun to permeate through the glass, the transparent plexiglass, and heat up this cold frame. And that is a benefit as well as a problem, because if you notice, I don't have an exhaust fan. I don't have really anything besides opening up the lid and putting up that stop to stop this thing from overheating. So I do need to keep an eye on it, especially when that sun starts to come back over in the spring. However, there is a dual purpose to this. On some of those warmer days, it is also going to regulate that temperature. It is going to keep it at a more consistent temperature of what has been happening over the past couple of days or weeks. And in theory, that will help these plants from breaking dormancy early. And why do you need to protect trees? I've done a little bit of research. I'm no expert, but you see these trees out in nature and they're fine. Well, the earth and the ground has thermal heat. Okay, there's a magma core, and as little or as much as that may be, that's enough to protect those roots. Now, the trunks, the leaves, all that sort of stuff, they are actually pretty good at dealing with cold temperatures. And yeah, if you get a rainy day followed by a deep freeze, you'll get some broken branches, all that sort of stuff. That's something to watch out for. But generally, it is not detrimental for the health of the tree. However, the roots are the concern, right? You take these trees that are naturally grown in the ground with that thermal heat, then you put them into a pot. Now, these roots are susceptible to frost and anything else, right? So that's the purpose of this cold frame. I do have a couple concerns, and this is why I haven't necessarily completely settled on a open substrate. It's better. It is the standard practice of bonsai to use an open substrate that allows proper drainage, immediate drainage essentially, and aeration to the roots. Those roots need to breathe. But for me, I just have this thought that deep freeze, that cold, will be able to reach those roots a lot easier. Whereas, a more natural soil-based will insulate those roots a little bit better. So I have a variety of soils going on here, and I have figured out my premium substrate. I've mixed all my own, and from when I started, I've tried different mixes and some generic store-bought ones mixed with other amendments in order to help with drainage and stuff of that nature. However, I am pretty satisfied with the materials I'm using for my premium substrate. And let's see if we can get you a little bit of a closer look here. So if we kind of zoom in and focus a bit, that's what I'm talking about. That's my premium, that is my open substrate, and I am very happy with it. There is an adjustment I need to make, and that's going to be the organic compound in it. So my premium is essentially 2 parts inorganic, 1 part organic, and I do want to improve the organic compound I'm currently using. And with that, I'm also going to be improving my more, natural soil-based soils with that same component. And I haven't quite settled yet, but this here is sort of a newer mix that I've been working on, and I'm going to call it my Mid Plus. That is probably what I will be repotting some of these guys, and these guys, they're in what I'm going to call my low grade. It's when I kind of started out, I was basically amending some generic products to allow for better drainage and maybe some weight and stability. And that being said, these will be repotted come the springtime. However, after that, I will likely not repot these for another 1.5 to 2 years, right after the spring. So we'll see what that looks like, and if there's some dramatic growth, I might reconsider it. If there's a health issue, I might need to do an emergency repot. But after I pot these up into something a little bit more sustainable, like my Mid or my Mid Plus, I will essentially let them fill that pot and become a little bit root bound. However, I do have a variety in here, and that does come with a purpose of finding out if my concerns have any validity, or if it's something I don't need to worry about. Like I said, my weather here is pretty extreme, so I'm just collecting some data, right? I did also mention that my background is in the construction industries. So, messing with soil mediums and soil substrates and inorganic substrates, that is definitely going to be a big part of what I want to find out. But more along the point, in the construction industry, at least here in Canada, we have what's known as the minimum standard. So it is essentially what is needed to be considered legal. The minimum standard. And that's what I'm trying to research, because here in Canada, if you try and buy a bonsai substrate, you are paying a lot. It's very expensive here. If you want to get, any component, you're probably paying about $20 for a volume that might fill one of these, 4-inch pots. Actually, I think they're 5-inch pots, but $20 for one component, where you're probably going to need 3, or you can get a premix for about $20 just to fill one pot. Look, I'm not saying put your refined trees into an organic substrate. That might be bad advice. Maybe not. I will do my research, and I will try on something a little bit more developed in the future. However, for a lot of these are foraged. I was working a landscaping job last year, and I was able to pull up a bunch of trees, and some of them lived, some of them died. I don't necessarily think that was due to the soil, because some have thrived, whereas others just kind of gave up. And that might be how I foraged them, how I dug them out of the ground, their previous conditions. Maybe they were already dealing with something. But it's all about that minimum standard. I want to find something that's affordable for a general bulk use. I want to be able to use something for volume, and if I'm going out, I'm buying a garden center tree, nursery stock, and maybe I want to put it into something a little bit better, but not quite, the premium. And the premium, I should also mention, I mixed it. I went out, I bought the components myself from, in bulk at various locations, and I'm going to tell you, they were, about a 2-hour trip in different directions, each of them, in order to find these components. And the organic, I actually ordered from the internet, and like I said, I'm not entirely happy with it, and it was expensive. It was more expensive than, the inorganic, which, it's strange. So that's the purpose of my channel. deviation. I want to deviate a little bit away from the standard, or some of the dogma that people say you can't use this or you have to use that, right? I want to deviate a little bit, and like I said, it's for a volume use. This is my thoughts anyways. And when I do have a tree for refinement, you bet I will be putting it into what is suggested. And I don't want to steer anybody wrong here. Like, it's that way for a reason. There is already a lot of data, right? Like, people have figured this out. People have been doing this for hundreds of years, but that's sort of the thought too, is that if people have been doing this for hundreds of years, do you really think they were mixing up academia and lava rock and all that sort of stuff? Maybe, but I've seen some of these older folks on YouTube, and they're using dirt, they're using sandy loam, and their trees look good. Their trees look like refined trees, and maybe it's their climate, but I don't see a lot of really professional grade stuff going on around here that isn't the general practice or standard or such strict. I see people making up their own mixes and stuff like that, but I think I have a pretty good one here. I think I can compete, so we'll see. And hopefully there's a lot more other than just this modified Coldframe that I could use some of my construction knowledge to hopefully assist somebody else who maybe wants to grow some trees in an urban environment. We'll see. And I do want to leave a little bit for the future, but if we look here, these are foraged, right? These are nothing major, but they're cool, right? When I started this hobby, I started with $26, and I didn't take it seriously, but I seem to enjoy it, and I want to improve, and I want other people to get into this hobby, because you know what? It's not all fun and games. It is sort of something you need to consider the health of the plant, and I don't want these to die, but at the same time I do want to practice some of these techniques, and I will be doing some advanced techniques as well. We'll see if I can show you some innovation, if I can show you a new minimum standard, or perhaps something from the past that people have kind of forgotten about. We'll see. Well, hey, wish me luck. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.